Okay, it's time for my follow-up review of the Bluboo S8. Now, I said it would take 7 days to post this review, but actually I've drawn my conclusion in about 5. I've used this phone as my main phone for 5 days now, and here's what I've found. So it's been a mixture of good and bad, as most things are. So let's start with the good points. I think probably one of the really good points about this phone is it's got a very pretty design. I mean, look at this rear cover. That's a very striking and pretty design. I like the look and feel of this phone. It's got a good technical feature set. It's got a good CPU. It's got a notification LED, sensors for light, proximity, orientation, acceleration, magnetic field. That's actually quite a good set of features for a budget smartphone. The audio volume in call and on the headphones is clear and of adequate quality. It's probably lacking a little bit in volume, but it's adequate. Battery life on this phone is actually pretty good. At the end of a full day of use, of standard use, browsing the web, reading emails, watching a few videos, making phone calls, I still had 75% charge left at midnight. The camera is actually quite good. Let's spend a little bit of time looking at the camera. So I've done a variety of video samples. So this seems like as good a place as any to test out the camera function. We're in bright sunlight, and this is what the video function is like in brightly sunlit conditions. The reason why this hippo is segregated from the others is he bought the wrong phone, and now his friends won't play with him. I did another one indoors. This is a selection of still life objects. And I took some nighttime video. Now, nighttime video was a little bit disappointing. It was very poor light. This was down at the village square, and the camera didn't cope very well with the low light. It didn't do what a lot of other smartphones would do, which is overcompensate by overexposing, which often ends up with grainy, awful footage. It just didn't capture enough light, and so the low light video has come out very dark, but clearish for what you can see. In terms of still photos, the still photos were actually pretty crisp and clear as well. As long as the light is good, you can get some good quality photographs on this phone. So what else is good about this phone? The Fingerprint Unlock is pretty reliable and quick, and actually has adapted to my fingerprints. So it's quicker than it was when I first unboxed this phone. It's also very good at coping with different orientations of fingerprint, and so it will unlock when I take it out of my pocket and touch it that way up. It will unlock. Not all fingerprint sensor phones I've seen are as good as this at coping with different orientations. It has a notification LED, but I think it only has one color available, which is green. Now, interestingly, in my first unboxing review, I thought one of these two was a notification LED. These are the proximity and light sensors. Notification LED actually shines from behind an obscured opaque panel, so that only appears when it's illuminated. You can't see that when it's not flashing. So the other thing to say about this is some people will prefer this form factor. So it's a taller, narrower phone than some of the other phones we've looked at, and some people will prefer that. It's particularly suited for watching video in landscape format like that. Perhaps if you're consuming mostly text in forums, emails, websites, you might find it's a little bit inconvenient because the narrow screen width here means the text will be shrunk down. And whilst you can rotate and then zoom and look at the page width that way, you then end up doing quite a lot of scrolling. So the form factor will be good for some, not so good for others. Right, so that's probably most of the positives covered. Now it's time to talk about the things that are not so good about this phone. So where do we start? I think probably the first place to start is this bezel. I do wish the manufacturers would not promise us bezel-less phones and then deliver a phone with a bezel on it. This is not acceptable. It's not acceptable to have marketing images that do not conform to the product you will deliver. Unacceptable. Don't lie to your customers. It's the first thing they're going to look at when they get it out of the box. It's just stupid. Tell us what the phone's going to be like. This is a good-looking phone, but it's not acceptable to lie about it. Okay, that's that little rant over. Deep breath. Okay. Right, a few other things I didn't like about this phone. There are ads on the lock screen. That's also not acceptable. I do understand the ad-supported model of apps on Google Play. Don't get me wrong. However, I do not expect ads baked into the default offering that I get with a smartphone. Not acceptable. Now, those ads are in the lock screen, which is part of the launcher. 360 OS is the name of the customized Android that is running on this phone. Now, of course, I've said in previous videos, you can change that if you want. You can put a different launcher in, but actually it turns out you can't. This phone actively resists changing the launcher. So I tried to install Arrow Launcher on it, which is a Microsoft product, and it won't let it run. It will switch back to 360 OS. And I've looked everywhere in the settings to see if there was something in the security settings that I had to do to make that possible, and it doesn't appear to be possible. The 360 OS is the baked-in launcher and operating system for this phone, and you're going to have a hard time changing it. Now, that would not be such a problem if it were not for the fact that the OS is actually quite buggy and laggy and crashy. So I've experienced quite a bit of lag, especially in getting back to the home screen from an app. So when I hit the home button, sometimes there's a 2 or 3 second delay before it actually goes back to the home screen from an app. I also had several occasions where the phone just crashed, froze, or gave me an error message. And also, when I was transferring files using USB-C across to my PC, I could transfer one file at a time, but if I tried to transfer multiple photos, it would very often crash in the middle of a transfer. The other small gripe is that whilst I've said the audio volume is acceptable, the audio quality on the speaker is not. So if we'll just go to my voicemail and we'll have a listen to a voicemail here.
No new messages. Main menu. For your messages, press 2. Personal greetings, press 3. Mailbox settings, press 4. Help, press 9.
Right, so that sound that you hear there when we were listening to my voicemail, that is the sound of a small speaker being driven beyond its capacity. So whilst the audio volume is acceptable, the quality is not. Let's have another listen to something else. So let's have a listen to the audio on one of my YouTube videos. It copes pretty well with the higher frequencies, but it's not so good at the lower frequencies, and there is a tendency to have distortion at the louder moments. The screen, let's talk about the screen, because the screen is a mixed bag. The screen is only 720p, well 720 by 1440, so it's actually a 2 to 1 aspect ratio. Now, despite being only 720p, it is actually pretty crisp, and so when we go back to the home screen, I mean, there's some pretty crisp text here, and really there's no pixelation or anything like that. You don't actually notice that this is only a 720 screen. However, contrast is a little bit lacking, so contrast makes it look a little bit washed out at times, so not so good there. But as I say, still quite a crisp and sharp screen. Now, one of the things that people often ask about in these videos is the dual camera, and in particular its usage in bokeh mode. Now, bokeh mode is supposed to be a kind of simulation of narrow depth of field that you get on a digital SLR camera. What's supposed to happen is the two cameras focus at different focal lengths, and by doing so they recognize the subject and blur out the background. So a good, competent bokeh mode would be subject aware, and so it would recognize the whole of the foreground subject and blur out the whole of the background. Unfortunately, the bokeh mode on this phone does not do that. All it really does is apply an oval blur mask onto the image, which you can do in software without dual cameras, so it's a bit worthless really, the bokeh mode. I pretty much call that a fake bokeh or fokeh. So that's probably it for the Bluboo S8. I'm probably not going to continue using this phone because despite the fact that the camera is quite good, the intrusive ads and the buggy crashiness of the OS is getting on my nerves a little bit. Some of the things that I've complained about in here might be fixed by software updates later. Some of them may be a result of the fact that this is a pre-production sample, although I tend to doubt it. I think I've probably got the latest version of the OS on here. Certainly I've tried updating and there haven't been any over-the-air updates. So there we go, that's the Bluboo S8. If you think I've missed anything out on here, then please feel free to ask me in the comments. Thanks for watching and I hope to see you again soon.